My brother Troy stood at the kitchen sink of our childhood home, gripping Mom's pewter urn like it was a bag of trash, and said without looking at me, "This needs to go, Harper. It's been 3 months. She's dead. Move on." Before I could process what he meant, he walked straight to the garbage can, lifted the lid, and dropped our mother's ashes onto yesterday's coffee grounds and eggshells with a hollow thunk that made my stomach lurch. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. The moment he'd laugh and say he was kidding. But he just wiped his hands on his jeans and asked what I wanted for lunch, like he hadn't just thrown away the woman who raised us. That's when I knew this wasn't grief making him cruel. It was something darker, something calculated, and the way he kept glancing toward Mom's office, the room he'd locked the day after her funeral, told me exactly where to find the truth. Let me back up to August 2024, when Mom died from pancreatic cancer at 62 after a 6-month battle that left her skeletal and exhausted. I'm Harper Colby, 29, a high school art teacher in Portland, and I'd spent those final months driving 4 hours every weekend to Salem to help with her care, while Troy, 35 and self-employed as a business consultant, lived 20 minutes away but visited maybe twice. At her bedside on August 14th, Mom had gripped my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "The safe in my office. Combination is your birthday, month, day, year. Don't let Troy touch it before you open it. Promise me." I'd promised, confused because I didn't even know she had a safe, and 2 days later, she was gone. At the funeral, Troy cried loudly while I stood numb, and afterward, he announced he'd handle all the estate stuff because I was too emotional and busy with work. I'd let him take control because that's what I'd always done. Troy was older, louder, more confident, and I'd spent 29 years being the quiet little sister who didn't make waves. He'd moved into Mom's house temporarily to sort through her belongings, changing the locks without asking me and saying it was for security purposes since the house would be sold soon. When I asked about the will, he assured me Mom had left everything split evenly between us, that he'd filed the paperwork with her attorney, and that we'd each get about $85,000 after the house sold and debts were paid. The number felt low. Mom had been a pharmacist for 35 years and lived modestly, but I didn't question it because questioning Troy meant enduring his lectures about how I didn't understand finances and should trust family. I went back to Portland, teaching summer art classes and trying to process grief while Troy sent occasional texts, donated Mom's clothes, sold her car, cleaning out the garage. Then came September 22nd, when I drove to Salem for what Troy called a final walkthrough before listing the house. I'd brought flowers to put on Mom's grave, planning to visit after we finished, but when I arrived, Troy was in the kitchen with the urn. I watched him throw it away, my brain freezing in disbelief. And when I finally found my voice, I asked what he was doing. "Getting rid of clutter," he said, like Mom's ashes were old magazines. "The realtor comes tomorrow. We need this place empty." I lunged for the garbage can, but Troy stepped between me and it, his jaw set. "Harper, don't be dramatic. She's gone. Ashes are just ashes. You want to keep them, take them now, but they're not staying here." I reached past him, pulled the urn from the trash, and held it against my chest while he sighed like I was the unreasonable one. I rinsed the urn in the sink, my hands shaking with rage and grief, while Troy scrolled through, his phone ignoring me. I asked when we could discuss the estate details, and he said everything was handled, that the attorney would send final paperwork next week. I asked about Mom's office, why it was locked, and Troy's face hardened. "It's full of paperwork I'm organizing. You don't need to worry about it." But I was worrying now, remembering Mom's whispered instructions about the safe, her urgency about opening it before Troy touched it. I asked directly if there was a safe in her office, and Troy went very still for just a second before saying, "There's nothing important in there. Old tax documents, insurance papers. I'm handling it." That tiny pause, that flicker of tension, told me everything. He was lying. And whatever was in that safe was important enough to make him nervous. I pretended to accept his answer, made small talk about the realtor and potential buyers, and left after an hour with Mom's urn secure in my car. But instead of driving home to Portland, I parked 3 blocks away and waited. At 6:47 p.m., Troy's truck pulled out of the driveway, heading toward downtown Salem. I waited another 10 minutes, then drove back to the house and used the garage door code, the same one we'd had since childhood, which Troy apparently hadn't thought to change. I walked through the dim house toward Mom's office, my heart pounding, and found the door locked with a new deadbolt. I tried forcing it, but the door was solid oak. I sat on the hallway floor, thinking, then remembered the window. Mom's office had a window facing the backyard, and Troy wouldn't have thought to secure it from outside. I went around to the backyard, found the window locked but old, and used a screwdriver from the garage to pry it open with a crack that sounded impossibly loud in the quiet evening. I climbed through, landing awkwardly on Mom's desk, and stood in the dark office she'd spent so many hours in, paying bills and doing paperwork at the old wooden desk that smelled like her lavender hand cream. I turned on the small desk lamp and started searching. Behind Mom's framed pharmacy license, I found it, a wall safe, gray and serious-looking, with a digital keypad. I tried my birthday, or 4/17/1996. The safe beeped twice, red light flashing. Wrong combination. I tried month day only, 4/17. Wrong again. Then I remembered Mom had whispered month day year, so I tried the year first, 96/04/17. Green light. Click. The safe door swung open, and inside were documents that would destroy my brother. The first thing I saw was Mom's actual will, dated March 2023, with her signature notarized and official. I pulled it out with trembling hands and read by lamplight. She'd left the house to me, not split between us, to me, Harper Colby, in its entirety, because Harper has been my constant support and deserves security. She'd left Troy $15,000 as his inheritance, noting, "This represents his contribution to our relationship." The will named her friend Vivian Hughes as executor, not Troy. There was also a handwritten letter on Mom's stationery. "Harper, if you're reading this, Troy has tried to control my estate. He's been pressuring me for months to change my will, to give him power of attorney, to let him manage my finances. I refused. This will is my true wishes. The house is yours. Don't let him steal what I'm leaving you." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the paper. But there was more in the safe. A folder labeled Troy Evidence, containing printed emails, bank statements, and a timeline Mom had created in her careful handwriting. The timeline started in May 2023. Troy asked to borrow $12,000 for business investment. I said no. He became angry. June 2023. Troy accessed my savings account using old joint account from his college years that I forgot to close. Withdrew $8,500 without permission. Confronted him. He said he'd pay it back. July 2023. Another $6,000 gone. Troy claims it's a loan. I'm closing the account. The entries continued through her cancer diagnosis, her treatments, her final months, documenting how Troy had systematically stolen from her while she was sick. The bank statements showed withdrawals totaling $43,700 between May 2023 and August 2024. Money he'd taken from a woman dying of cancer. I felt sick, physically sick, reading my mother's careful documentation of her own son's theft. The final document in the folder was a copy of a different will, one dated July 2024, 1 month before Mom's death. It was typed on legal letterhead from an attorney I'd never heard of, Patterson and Associates, and it named Troy as sole heir to everything, with me receiving nothing. At the bottom, there was a signature that looked like Mom's but wasn't quite right. The K in Catherine had a different loop. Attached to this fake will was a sticky note in Mom's handwriting. Troy brought this to me on July 18 and demanded I sign it. I refused. He left angry. I believe he may forge my signature and try to submit this as my real will. Harper, if he does, the handwriting expert I've prepaid is Dr. Isabel Grant at Pacific Forensics in Portland. Her number is 503-555-0147. She has samples of my real signature and can prove forgery. My mother had known Troy would try to cheat me, had documented everything, had set up defenses, and had been proven right. I took photos of every document with my phone, my hands steadier now that shock was giving way to cold fury. I photographed the real will, the fake will, the timeline, the bank statements, the letter, Mom's note about the handwriting expert, everything. Then I carefully put the originals back in the safe, closed it, and climbed out the window into the dark backyard. I drove home to Portland in a daze, arriving at my small apartment at 11:34 p.m. and immediately called the number Mom had left for Dr. Grant. I got voicemail and left a message explaining who I was and that my mother, Catherine Colby, had retained her services. Dr. Grant called back at 8:15 the next morning, Sunday, and confirmed that Mom had indeed paid her in advance to analyze any disputed will documents. She asked me to send photos of both wills, which I did immediately, and she called back 2 hours later with professional certainty. The signature on the July will is definitely forged. I can testify to that in court. I spent Sunday researching probate attorneys in Salem and found Simone Walsh, whose website emphasized estate fraud and will contests. I emailed her the photos of everything I'd found, and she called me Monday morning before I'd even finished my first coffee. "Harper, this is one of the clearest cases of estate fraud I've seen. Your brother forged a will, submitted it for probate, and has been liquidating your mother's assets, all of which is felony-level crime. We need to act immediately before he sells the house." She explained that Troy had filed the fake will with probate court on August 20th, 6 days after Mom's death, and had gotten himself appointed as executor because no one challenged it. He'd been legally authorized to sell Mom's car, donate her belongings, and was now preparing to sell the house and keep all proceeds. Simone said we'd need to file an emergency petition to halt the estate proceedings and present the real will, along with evidence of forgery and theft. Simone also recommended hiring a forensic accountant to trace all of Troy's theft and document the full scope of his fraud. She connected me with Felix Porter, who specialized in estate asset recovery, and I met with both of them on Tuesday, September 25th, in Simone's downtown Salem office. I showed them everything: the safe contents, the timeline Mom had created, the bank statements showing $43,700 in unauthorized withdrawals, the 2 wills, Dr. Grant's analysis. Felix reviewed the financial documents and said quietly, "This is systematic exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Your brother stole from your dying mother over 15 months. That's elder abuse, and it's criminal." He explained he'd need access to all of Mom's accounts to trace where the money went, and Simone filed a court motion that afternoon requesting emergency access to estate records and immediate suspension of Troy's authority as executor. The filing specifically alleged forgery, fraud, theft, and elder abuse. The hearing was set for October 3rd, giving us 1 week to prepare. Troy found out about the filing on Wednesday when he was served with court papers at Mom's house. He called me 17 times in 2 hours, leaving increasingly angry voicemails that ranged from confused, "What the hell is this about?" to threatening, "You're making a huge mistake, Harper. Huge," to manipulative, "Mom would be so disappointed in you for tearing the family apart over money." I didn't answer, but I saved every voicemail and forwarded them to Simone, who said they demonstrated consciousness of guilt and potential witness intimidation. Troy also sent texts. "Whatever you think you found, you're wrong. I've been handling everything legally. You're going to regret this." I screenshot each message, added them to my evidence folder, and blocked his number. Simone had advised me not to engage with him at all before the hearing. That evening, Vivian Hughes, Mom's best friend and the named executor in the real will, called me crying. Troy had shown up at her house, demanding to know if she'd put me up to this, and she'd had to threaten to call police to make him leave. Felix worked fast, obtaining Mom's bank records through Simone's court motion, and what he discovered was worse than the $43,700 we already knew about. Between May 2023 and August 2024, Troy had taken $67,300 total from Mom through a combination of the forgotten joint account, forged checks, and transfers he'd made after getting her online banking password by claiming he was helping her pay bills. Felix traced the money to Troy's personal accounts and from there to payments for a new truck, gambling debts at a local casino, and credit card bills for luxury purchases, designer watches, expensive dinners, a trip to Vegas in July 2024 while Mom was in hospice. He'd stolen nearly $70,000 from a dying woman to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford, and he'd done it methodically, carefully, betting she was too sick to stop him and that I was too trusting to question him afterward. Felix prepared a comprehensive report with transaction timelines, proof of forged signatures on checks, and bank records showing Troy's spending patterns. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep, lying in my small bedroom rehearsing what I'd say in court and wondering if the judge would believe me over Troy. My brother had always been confident, persuasive, the kind of person who could talk his way out of anything, while I was quiet, uncertain, the little sister who second-guessed herself. But I had something Troy didn't. The truth, documented and irrefutable, assembled by my dying mother, who'd known exactly what he was. At 3:47 a.m., I got up and wrote a letter to Mom, telling her I'd found the safe, followed her instructions, and was fighting for what she'd wanted me to have. I told her I was sorry I hadn't questioned Troy sooner, sorry I'd let him control everything, sorry I'd been so passive. Then I burned the letter in my kitchen sink, watching the paper curl and blacken, and felt something settle in my chest, a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. October 3rd arrived cold and gray, typical Portland fall weather. I drove to Salem with Simone, who reviewed our strategy one final time. Present the real will, demonstrate its validity through Mom's attorney and witness statements. Expose the forged will through Dr. Grant's analysis, document Troy's theft through Felix's financial forensics, and request immediate removal of Troy as executor, with criminal referral for fraud and elder abuse. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal, with Judge Anthony Morales presiding. Troy sat with his attorney, a man named Keith Brennan, who looked expensive and annoyed, while Simone and I sat across from them. Vivian sat in the gallery behind me, her presence steadying. When Judge Morales called the case, Simone stood and presented our emergency petition, explaining that new evidence had emerged showing the currently probated will was forged and that the decedent's true will named a different executor and different beneficiaries. Judge Morales reviewed our submitted evidence, the real will from the safe, the forged will Troy had filed, Dr. Grant's forensic analysis, and the financial records, with growing interest. He asked Simone to call her first witness, and Dr. Grant took the stand, explaining her credentials as a forensic handwriting analyst with 23 years of experience. She testified that she'd been retained by Catherine Colby in June 2024 to analyze any disputed signatures, that she'd obtained multiple samples of Mrs. Colby's genuine signature, and that the signature on the July 2024 will was definitively not written by Catherine Colby. She pointed out specific inconsistencies in letter formation, pressure patterns, and flow that proved forgery. Under cross-examination, Keith tried to suggest Dr. Grant was biased because Mom had paid her in advance, but Dr. Grant calmly explained that her professional reputation depended on objective analysis, not on who paid her fee. The judge asked pointed questions that suggested he was taking the forgery allegation very seriously. Next, Felix Porter testified about the financial analysis, walking the judge through $67,300 in unauthorized withdrawals, forged checks, and transfers Troy had made from Mom's accounts. Felix presented a timeline showing the thefts had started before Mom's cancer diagnosis and continued through her death, with some withdrawals occurring while she was literally in hospice care. He showed where the money had gone: Troy's truck payment, casino gambling, luxury purchases, demonstrating that this wasn't a son helping his mother pay bills, but a son systematically looting her assets. Judge Morales asked Troy's attorney if he had any explanation for these transactions, and Keith requested a recess to consult with his client. When they returned 15 minutes later, Keith's face was grim, and Troy looked pale and smaller than I'd ever seen him. Keith admitted there had been some informal loans between Troy and his mother, but claimed they were consensual and that any paperwork issues were unintentional. Judge Morales was not impressed. He asked Troy directly if he'd taken $67,300 from his mother's accounts, and Troy, under oath, stammered that he'd borrowed money with her permission and planned to pay it back. The judge asked if he had any written loan agreements, any emails discussing these loans, any documentation beyond his word. Troy admitted he didn't. Judge Morales then asked about the will. Had Troy submitted the July 2024 document, knowing the signature was forged? Keith jumped in, saying Troy had believed the will was genuine, but the judge cut him off and repeated the question to Troy. My brother sat silent for nearly 30 seconds, everyone watching him, before saying quietly, "I thought it was what she wanted." Not a denial, not a defense, just a weak justification. Judge Morales leaned back and said, "Mr. Colby, the evidence suggests you forged your mother's will, stole nearly $70,000 from her while she was dying, and attempted to defraud your sister of her rightful inheritance. This is beyond a civil matter." The judge's ruling was immediate and comprehensive. The July 2024 will was declared invalid and excluded from probate. The March 2023 will was accepted as Catherine Colby's true last testament. Troy was removed as executor effective immediately. Vivian Hughes was appointed executor as Mom had originally intended, and the case was referred to the Marion County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation of forgery, theft, and elder abuse. Judge Morales also ordered Troy to account for every penny of the $67,300 he'd taken and to cease any contact with estate property or with me. Troy sat frozen while the judge spoke, his expensive attorney scribbling notes that wouldn't save him from what was coming. As we left the courtroom, Troy tried to approach me in the hallway, but Vivian stepped between us and told him firmly that he was not to speak to me. I walked past my brother without looking at him, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction that Mom's plan had worked perfectly. The criminal investigation moved quickly because we'd done all the work for them. The district attorney, a woman named Cassandra Park, met with Simone, Felix, and me on October 10th to review evidence, and she said they'd be filing charges within 2 weeks for forgery, theft, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and fraud. On October 24th, Troy was arrested at his apartment and charged with 4 felonies carrying combined potential sentences of up to 23 years. His bail was set at $150,000, which he couldn't pay, so he spent 3 days in county jail before a bail bondsman helped him post the $15,000 fee. Meanwhile, Vivian was systematically undoing all of Troy's estate actions, reclaiming what could be reclaimed, documenting what had been lost, and preparing the house for transfer to me as Mom had intended. The house appraised at $340,000, and after paying Mom's final medical bills and funeral expenses, the estate was worth approximately $287,000, all of which would come to me once probate closed. Troy's trial was set for March 2025, but in January his attorney negotiated a plea deal. Troy would plead guilty to 2 counts of felony theft and 1 count of forgery, serve 18 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation, and pay full restitution of $67,300 plus interest and legal fees, totaling $94,600. The exploitation charge was dropped as part of the deal. I attended the sentencing hearing on February 14, 2025, and watched Troy stand before Judge Morales and admit what he'd done, that he'd stolen from our mother, forged her will, and attempted to cheat me out of my inheritance. The judge told him, "You betrayed your dying mother's trust for gambling money and luxury items. You're fortunate this plea deal is available." Troy was taken directly to Marion County Correctional Facility to begin his sentence. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me once, and I looked back without emotion. The brother I'd grown up with was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and didn't forgive. The house became officially mine in March 2025, and I spent a month cleaning it out properly, carefully, keeping things Mom had loved and donating the rest to charities she'd supported. I found photos of us as kids, back when Troy had been different, or maybe he'd always been this way, and I just hadn't seen it. I found Mom's journals, where she'd written about her disappointment in Troy's choices and her pride in my teaching career. I found the urn I'd rescued from the trash, and I buried Mom's ashes in the garden she'd loved, under the cherry tree that bloomed every spring. I didn't sell the house like Troy had planned. Instead, I moved in, leaving my Portland apartment behind, starting fresh in the home Mom had wanted me to have. I transferred to a Salem high school to teach art, and on weekends I worked in Mom's garden, planting flowers and vegetables, making the space beautiful again. The $94,600 Troy was ordered to pay came in monthly installments garnished from his prison work wages, $47 per month, which meant full repayment would take 168 years. But I didn't care about the money anymore. today, sitting on the porch of the home that's truly mine, I think about that moment when Troy threw Mom's ashes away, the casual cruelty that finally broke through my passive acceptance and made me fight. If he hadn't done that, I might never have opened the safe, never discovered his fraud, never found the evidence Mom had carefully assembled to protect me. Troy thought throwing away the urn would erase Mom's presence and her influence, but instead it led me straight to her final gift, not just the house or the inheritance, but the lesson that love means protecting people even after you're gone, and that silence in the face of cruelty is its own kind of betrayal. I learned my mother had been stronger than I'd known, documenting Troy's theft while cancer consumed her, preparing defenses I'd need months later. I learned I was stronger than I'd believed, capable of fighting for justice instead of accepting whatever I was given. Troy is somewhere in prison, serving time for stealing from the woman who gave him life, and I'm here in her garden, teaching art to teenagers and living the peaceful life she wanted for me. The safe is empty now, its contents having served their purpose, but I keep the combination written on a card in my wallet. 960417, my birthday reversed. My mother's way of saying she'd always known Troy would come for what wasn't his, and she'd made sure I could stop him when he did.